Hello, I'm Keith Wilson with the Schmidt Music Trombone Shop, back with another instrument review for you. And today I've got a really unique piece of trombone heritage, specifically a 1937 Olds trombone. Now, I think this is an old super, but not sure. We'll talk about that here. But and absolutely 1937 Olds here. Obviously, small bore tenor trombone. Really interesting playing instrument, and obviously a lot of great heritage and history behind this. So I'm really excited to play this for you, and then I'll talk about it afterwards. I'm going to be playing all of this today on a Bach 7C. So again, this is a 1937 Olds trombone. F.E. Olds, of course, was a maker that started in Los Angeles in the 1920s, especially in the 30s, going into 40s, 50s, 60s, even to the 70s. A very well-known maker, very much a huge part of the California brass maker scene. Had a long relationship with Reynolds, and of course, a lot of the Olds history and heritage was continued on through Canstill throughout the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and beyond there. So this particular Old, again, is from 1937. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think this is their super model. Unfortunately, there's a lot of discrepancy as far as what Olds did with the models back then. They didn't do a great job of actually putting a lot of information on the instruments in a lot of cases here. So this is either a super or it is potentially one of their standard series, which were still professional level instruments here. But there's a few features of this that make me think it is a super. Now, we're more familiar with the old supers from the late 40s. The post-World War II 40s going into 50s. These were instruments that had that distinctive sound band, what the Germans would call a Kranz of the nickel-silver around the bell. Now, there are earlier versions, earlier records of supers from the late 30s like this that did not have that, and there were some other design differences as well. This particular instrument is a dual bore. It's a 485 or 500 dual bore, 7.5-inch bell in red brass. The bell was re-lacquered at least at one point here, but definitely red brass underneath there. nickel silver, obviously tuning slide, neck pipe, full nickel silver tuning slide. This, of course, has the unique fluting on the inner hand slide. So if you've not seen one of these olds from the 30s, from the 40s, even going into early 50s, they have this unique, not even hexagonal, there's more facets than that, but they had this fluted design, and the theory behind this from olds was that by creating less surface area, instead of by having all these ridges and creating this minimized surface area, that we would reduce how much wear we would have on the inner slide and outer slide, and it would be faster moving. Now, obviously, this is not a trend that continued on, but very, very unique feature with all of this. A couple things I noticed right away as far as the playing of the instrument. It definitely plays like a small instrument from this period. I originally tried this with my 6.5 AL, and boy, that mouthpiece just did not work at all. Even with the 7C, I do find that at softer dynamics, if I'm not really trying to put some energy into it, it's not just a softer sound, it just doesn't center as well for me. I do find I have to put a certain amount of energy into it, but what that means is it has this naturally brighter timbre. It gets a little bit more of that edge right off the bat, a little bit of that bark, but still a little bit more compact. So it's kind of nice if somebody's looking for an instrument where they're looking for a little bit more of that vintage sound, but they don't want to be dumping a ton of air into a more modern setup or a larger setup to try to get that sound. This does that a little bit more naturally as well. The balance is a little bit interesting. Now, this instrument was originally a friction fit there, so we did not have a locking collar. At some point, somebody came up with a really ingenious design here. It almost is like the hand slide lock, in that you move the slide like that, and you lock it into place. So kind of a unique configuration there, but even beyond that, it's a pretty front-heavy instrument. You can tell it's got narrow hand slide, very long, narrow bell section as well here, and even with the unique bear counterweight, of course, the bear was a symbol for olds for a very, very long time. So even with that counterweight, it's definitely front-heavy. So it's a little bit interesting to hold. And the bell itself is, even though it's a fairly small, compact bell, it is a little bit thicker gauge. So all of this, it leans forward a little bit there. But again, it's a lot of fun to play. Again, it's something I don't know that I would be able to use in a lot of modern commercial settings. But if I were somebody who was doing a lot more, like some real, trad jazz work, or some 20s going into 30s swing type of work, I could see the sound, especially if you were playing on more of like a vintage microphone setup or something like that. I think you could get a lot of that real classic trombone sound we think of that era pretty naturally. I think this would kind of do it on its own in a lot of cases there. But again, more than anything else, I just love seeing these pieces of history. I've been a big fan of the history of California brass makers for a long time, and anytime I get to see a piece of that history like this, it always makes me happy. I'm always glad to be able to put hands on and spend a little time with it. So I hope you enjoyed getting to learn a little bit about the 37 olds here. If you have any questions about this instrument, if you have any comments, if you can look at it for sure and say, oh yeah, this is definitely an olds or a standard, or if you have other thoughts, please feel free to leave them in the comments here. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. If you haven't checked out our channel, please consider subscribing. Hopefully we've got a lot of videos, a lot of content that might be interesting for you. And if you do like it, hit that notification button so we can let you know when we've got more videos coming out here. And as always, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. So thank you very much, everybody. Talk to you later.